Okay. This topic's quite a short one. Normally it'd be like 20-ish minutes, so we'll see how we go, but we'll get through most of it today. When you're playing around with Python in your early labs, you are no doubt just dealing with a single file a lot of the time. Once you start dealing with the project, though, you're dealing with multiple files, and this is where importing becomes a relevant topic. Importing is like using work between files. So why this matters is, as I just mentioned, most projects have multiple files in it. Very rarely will you work on Python that just has a single file, and you need to get comfortable with how to import between files, different ways to import, what you're importing and where it's from and stuff like that. So we're just going to talk about that at a really high level. And as you've probably already seen from your early work with Python, you're able to import code in Python from both libraries and from your own work. Now in C, there was a visually different way that you often worked with this. If you used the side brackets, it was kind of like, oh, it's a library function. And if you did the double quotes, it's like, this is something you wrote. Python has both of these capabilities, except the importing methods are exactly the same. So there is no kind of visual distinction here. In Python, when we import stuff, we are importing things like you see here, and you've seen in the project in the stub code. And what I've got here is an example of code that we'll pull up in VLab. But basically, we've got a function over here that converts the days. It converts days into year. Oh, right. It tells you, given a month and a day, how many days into the year you are. So if I say like October 5th, it'll say, you are 230 days into the year or something like that. So we've got this file here called calmath, and we're going to use this to try and understand importing. So in 2.3 here, I've got this file called calmath. It takes in a year and a day. The total equals the day. So it's like if I say like October 5th, then it's like, okay, we're 5 days into October, and then we figure out how many days are in all the previous months in the year that have passed. So if the month is, say, 1, because we're in February, because month is indexed at 0, so 0 is January, 1's February, then we add 31 days. So if I say, I use, say, 1 and 4 to say the 4th of February, then this will tell me that we've had this many days into the year. It'll like sum it up. I know there's like a sort of fence post error here, but like that's what the function does. And what happens is you might write functions like this, whether it's like in the project, whether you write helper functions, because you can add more files to your project, right? You can go and add more folders and more files if you want to. So you can do something like that. And then once you've written it, what you might do is you might write yourself a function like this one here, quick test, which is, it's just a function that you write, and you're like, okay, well, this is how I'm just going to test that it works. And you simply call it with 2 print statements, and then you call your quick test function, and you just basically are trying to tell month 0, day 0 should be is the result of that. So maybe we can run it. So we'll go into our 2.3 folder. I might make VLab big here because we're just going to be working with it. And then I'll simply run that Python 3 calmath, and it prints out, okay, so the 31st day of December gives me 365. Great, sure, that's roughly what I expect. But then it's like, all right, well, I should probably be using asserts here, right? Because we've learned about PyTest. So, let's quickly convert those. Test simple, that's a terrible test name. And then we'll just do 2 asserts. And what we're going to assert is that days into year is equal to something. And the first one should be 5, and this one should be 365. Right? And then we don't even need this quick test anymore. That's how you should do it, in theory. The reason I have it written as a print thing here is to demonstrate a point I'm trying to make in a sec. So we're going to leave that here for now, even though I'm just trying to make really clear that's probably not how you'd normally approach it. So you kind of have your test simple, and that function. Oops, sorry, forgot to undo one too many. That function kind of just works. It works, and I've got my little testing code here. Let's say you like that library a lot, so you want to use it in another file though. So you've got this other file here called like import2. And what import2 does is it actually imports 2 things. it imports sys, which is a Python library. So this isn't something that you wrote. It's actually like a hash includes.ao.h kind of thing. It's like a Python library. And then I'm importing calmath. Calmath is my file, and I import it because it's the same name here. So it's like I'm in this folder, and if I just import calmath, Python looks in my folder for that file calmath, and it's like, oh, I found that file. I've imported it now. Now what this import2.py file is it's essentially a file that uses sysargv and sysargc, which is something we haven't talked about much, to try and read in command line arguments so that we can actually have a more interactive way of dealing with this function. So if I, for instance, here call Python import2 and I run it, there's an error because, okay, expected character, I don't know what I've done wrong here. Okay, there was a space there by accident. So essentially what's happening here is that this backslash, by the way, is just how you oh, you don't need it here? Is it just for strings? Okay, maybe I'm dealing with the different, oh, with the comma there. Oh, that's very interesting. So that's just me adding something, and I kind of forgot. So the thing with Python is because indentation and white space matters in Python, it's very difficult for long lines of code just to bring it down to the next line. If you ever have to do that arbitrarily, you can either do that one of two ways. You can either do it by using a comma, because Python will be super happy if you just like use a comma and then come down to the next line. But also, if for some reason there's no comma to separate it, you can actually just put a backslash there and go down onto the next line. And that will tell Python, just, can you go to the next line and just kind of continue as normal? Like that. Yeah, so that's like what the backslash, that's a backslash. Yeah, that's what the backslash is for. So without getting into the argv, argc stuff too much in Python, what you are doing here is you're saying, I'm going to import sys, and as part of sys, there's actually a variable built into sys called argv. So if you print sysargv, it will actually give you, say, this list here, where like C and other things, you will have a you'll have the name of the file as the first element, but then if you add other command line arguments like 12 and 34 and 56, you actually get those added to the argv list. Now, because this is in C, we don't need an argc because we can just get the length of a list. It's Python, so we've just got the length of the list. So we're checking here, did they enter a month and a day of month, which will give us an argc, or a length of argv is 3. If they don't enter it, print a message, which is what we get here. Yep, it's like, you haven't given me the right number of arguments, and if we do give it, say 0 and 5, we get that, and it actually prints out the result here. But what you'll also notice this whole time that we've been doing this, which is a bit troubling, is that when we're trying to print these out, it's actually also printing out all this other stuff from calmath. And the reason for that is because of how Python does importing, and most languages are like this, is when Python imports from calmath into import2, it actually kind of processes the whole file. It does like a sweep of it. It like loads the function, it loads this function, and then it runs any code here. So for instance, like if I was to just put a big smiley face here, and I ran this, it's actually printing out, because whilst we're running the import2 file, it's importing calmath, which is executing all the code in it. The reason I have this example here is to basically demonstrate to you that a trick you'll see a lot in Python, and you'll see this a lot around, is that if you want code to run in a file, but only when you're invoking that file directly, as in when you're running that file directly, you can actually use this little trick here that's commented out. And it relies on this Python variable name that's kind of built into Python called name. Double underscore name. Double underscore name is a variable that Python populates for you. And what it does is, if it's the file you're invoking directly, like calmath, the value of that double underscore name variable is the string, the literal string double underscore main. However, if that line is being printed and that variable is being populated because you imported it, what it actually populates to is the name of the file itself. So if you're calling the file directly, it's _main. If that file is being imported, then when it gets to that line, it just prints the name of the file. So that's just like a subtle reality of how Python works here. And because of that, we can use this to our advantage and say, I only want you to print quick test in the case when _name is equal to _main. And this is what kind of basically protects us from when I want to actually test my CalMath with maybe some little testing code I have there. It prints all my info, but when I call import to, it just prints the number 5 like that. So that's like one way to kind of control that. And you can see that, this import to thing, I can change this around. It'll tell me how many days into the year, etc. So, I actually have that proper interaction now. In terms of importing, that's kind of the gist of like when you import a file, Python just parses it and pulls all that information into this file for usage. But some of the more interesting stuff are around both ways to import and how relative imports and stuff work. In terms of ways to import, which is probably all we'll have time for today, I think we'll talk about this relative imports just at the start of tomorrow's lecture, because it kind of ties a little bit into the packages stuff we'll be going through tomorrow. But in terms of ways to import, there are 3 different ways to import your file. If you have a file like lib.py and you're trying to import it into a file you want to use it, you can either do the import star from lib method, which is saying go to lib and import all of these variables, all of these functions and stuff, just as I can use them. We can use the second method, which is from the lib file, import these functions or variables, or we have the third method, which is the one we used, which is just import lib. Now, I'll just quickly contrast these 3 for you. So, firstly, if I was to do just import CalMath like this, what this does is it takes the entire CalMath functions and variables, and it means that I can access any of those if I simply do calmath.something. That is probably the clearest and the safest way to use something. It's very verbose, and it also doesn't tell you on the top line here why you're importing what you're importing. So this is kind of method 1. Method 2, well, this is method 3. Technically, on what the slides I had, this is method 3. Method 2 is probably the way we encourage you to do imports, which is where you say, from CalMath, import days into year, where you actually specify the things that you want to import, like this. So you say, from this file, import days into year. Now, the one difference this has is that now whenever I want to call this function, instead of doing calmath.days into year, I actually just call days into year like that, and this still works fine. So what we're doing here is we're really trading clarity of information. We're really making it clearer up at the import line what we're importing, and we're making it harder in our code to tell where it came from. Whereas the other type of import is the other way around. You can also import multiple things. So for instance, in this file here, if I had another variable called like name equals Hayden, and I simply then, if I wanted to print that too, and I said print name, I could also import that from CalMath just by adding another comma here. So that will work for me, because I'm taking that file and I'm importing a few different things from that file. Jeremy says, so if there's 10 functions you want to import, probably just easier to import the whole library? Yeah, I think so. I mean, 10's probably actually not that many still, because it's quite clear. I'd probably say if you're getting into the 15, 20 or something, it's probably easier to do it. 5 to 10 is just a lot, but I'd still use the from syntax and move it down to the next line. To be honest with you, as long as you're using either method 2 or 3, you're probably okay. The quick point I need to make about method 1, because we're about to finish up in a minute and kind of tie it off tomorrow, is method 1 pollutes the namespace. And what I mean by that is that if you do method 1, which is just import star from CalMath, This is effectively the same as method 2 in terms of its outcome, though the problem with it is you now don't... was it from CalMath? Oh. Okay, I think I did that the wrong way. Are those slides wrong? I think they are wrong. Oopsie. Is what this actually does is this goes and takes every single thing in that file and it makes it available for use here. And this is really bad because what happens then is someone comes along and they say, I've actually got another variable called sys. But then what sys does is this confuses Python now because it's trying to like... see, like, look at what's happened here. We've imported sys, we've done this blanket import from CalMath. Someone who's working on the CalMath library has come along and made something else accessible. And then that's come and been imported and confused sys, and now sys is confused because it's trying to pull the string from... Like, it's like a let everything in. And it's much better to either use the method 3 where you import it because it's all kind of covered by that name. Like you have to do calmath dot something, so there's no chance of conflict. Or method 2, because you're explicitly importing what you want, you're not risking yourself to what's actually happening with the library you're importing from. So method 2 or 3 is better. Don't use method 1. We'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow at the start of the packages lecture. So if you're watching this lecture, we'll talk about this at the start of the packages lecture. And I understand this one was like a very short thing because there wasn't much to talk about, but on your way out again, if you could, maybe you could either leave feedback for both tomorrow or today. I know you've just left feedback because I forgot, but I appreciate anyone's time. Again, we use this to figure out what worked and what didn't on a particular term. There's not much to importing. That's why it's short. It's like you import. There's a couple ways you can do it. That's it. Anyway, it's 12:01, so let's wrap it up. I'm sorry if there are a couple of questions I didn't get to. We can talk through those tomorrow as well. I think I got to many of them. Thank you, Matthew, for your useful input today, helping kind of elaborate on some things. And thanks just to everyone for helping out in the chat. It's always good to see people engaged. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Good luck with your tutes. And after tomorrow, we'll have gone through everything we need to make you feel like you've got everything under wraps for everything and all the main stuff in this project, iteration 1. So, yeah, cool. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.